Hey guys, me again, and welcome to Storytime with Moonelf. The social nature of this game among a group of naturally unsocial people has really developed into a very dynamic and some would say toxic environment. One that I've really had a lot of fun being a part of. I wanted to go over some of the more interesting stories that have happened during my time in classic World of Warcraft. For some reason, it's really difficult to get a lot of information for these stories, even when reaching out to some of the individuals involved, as most people in the game consider their character to be an extension of themselves, which I understand, and I will censor some of the names in order to avoid any inevitable drama. So let's get started, and please note, this is all based on a true story. The Great War of Razorgore. Like any other PvP server, we have a small group of people who are very generously and consistently killing the other faction while they're getting world buffs, or have full world buffs. In this circumstance, the server had 3 Horde rogues named Paris, Fergus, and Muick, where Paris was the clear leader. They would merely stalk Felwood 24 hours a day, griefing to their heart's content. A bit like wild dogs that were let loose to roam and destroy without any repercussions. Eventually this became too much, and all 3 wild dogs were put into cages as both factions rose up and forced the animals to heal. A peace treaty was written, stating, "Thou shalt not grief the Alliance while they get their rend buff." And so it was. Collateral was exchanged, embarrassing messages and personal information was sent by the leaders of each faction with the threat that if the peace was broken, this information would be exposed. Furthermore, the 2 leaders of both the Horde and the Alliance were given the greatest responsibility. A responsibility similar to how kingdoms were partitioned by a patriarch between his advisors before his death, the moderation of the server Discord. Only a few months later though, the temperatures within the server were already starting to heat, as Alliance characters were being made by Paris and his dogs, gaining control of the world channel in-game, and banning and silencing all the Alliance they could, week after week, and while griefing at Rend was forbidden, Felwood was slowly opened up as a king might let his starving followers hunt his game. Even though there were signs of cracks in the wall, the main component of the peace treaty was not breached, and the foundations were strong. Until this point, both faction leaders agreed to look the other way of any misdeeds. But as we know from history, all good things must come to an end. And in this circumstance, the strongest force of nature was enough to crumble an alliance between the greatest guilds on the server. Love. Helen was rumored by some as the #1 e-girl on the server, and Paris's infatuation for her was undeniable, where Paris would grief day in and day out, even ironically griefing an in-game wedding. But he never crossed the red line at Rend. This was until one faithful morning we all awoke and each Alliance Guild Discord server was flooded with message of war. It seems Paris, without provocation, climbed the mountains of Orgrimmar to slay an Alliance warrior named Anthony, innocently waiting for Rend to drop. A member of one of the server's Alliance speedrunning guilds was found out that Paris was asked by Helen to grief this Alliance warrior Anthony. Why Helen ordered Paris to kill so mercilessly is still understood, but this was clearly the shot heard around Razorgore that ultimately sparked a world war. The biggest Alliance guilds on the server, led by a warrior named Alexander, was launched into an instant blitzkrieg after first blood was spilt and breach of the peace treaty, where each member of Paris's guild was mercilessly taken down and camped for hours on end. Alexander was a no-nonsense leader who did not bend to threats or provocation, and instantly called on his allies for assistance. Now, more alliance guilds were in all-out war with Paris and his followers. Paris, in his lust, quickly called upon their closest ally and grieving co-guild for assistance, pushing the alliance before the day drew to an end. As night fell, Alexander and the alliance quickly realized that there was no turning back, and were reluctantly drawn into a war they did not want or start. The next few days were filled with small battles across Azeroth and intimidation tactics on Discord from both sides, where Paris's rage was met with a temporary ban by the Discord moderators. The tables were turned in favor of the Alliance as they tracked down and hunt the Horde one by one. This was about to change though, as the next day was Wednesday, and Paris's guild would be raiding Nax. Alexander and his allies were in position to pounce on Paris, hopefully as his guild entered Nax, even going as far as recruiting a group of mercenary gnomes with orbs of deception to kill those hordes summoning under the instance. But they never came. It wasn't before long that the Alliance figured out Paris and his lackeys were now running from Undercity with one other guild to charge into Nax and save the world buffs. Alexander readied his men and charged to meet Paris on the bridge of eastern and western Plaguelands in order to set up the ideal ambush. The positioning was perfect, and the trap was set to slaughter Paris and his men at the bridge checkpoint. Sweat was dripping from the Alliance's brow onto their keyboards as they wait to spring the trap on the mass of approaching Horde. Something strange happened next though, as the Horde just stopped in front of the bridge and waited. Quickly there was murmuring among the Alliance men, questioning how the Horde knew there was a trap, and soon they realized there must be a spy among the ranks. There was no time to think, and all they could do is act. The Alliance hopelessly charged into the ranks of the Horde. It was a slaughter, and many good Alliance men were lost that day. It was never said who called for the charge, but the damage was done. With the spirits of the Alliance crushed after the humiliating defeat at the battle at Plaguelands Bridge, all seemed to have been lost. Until the meeting of the officers the following day, tactics had to be changed, and Alexander quickly realized that the Alliance, with their greater number and coalition of backpedalers and RPers, would never win in a pitched battle against Paris and the Horde with PvP racials. New battle plans were drawn by Alexander to exploit Paris's greatest weakness. At this point, it was widely known that Paris was largely unstable, casting down anyone who slighted him in the least, both Horde and Alliance. If it was his love or jealousy for Helen that caused this, it is still not known, but resentment for Paris was growing within the ranks of the Horde, as he had cast down one too many of his brothers on his Alliance alt. The next Wednesday of the following week, the Alliance were in control of Naxxramas's entrance, waiting for their time to strike. But this time, things were different. This time, the Horde had turned their back on Paris and would not be supporting them in their efforts. One by one, the Horde guilds refused to fight with Paris as they charged into the awaiting Alliance. Buffs were dispelled, and Paris's raid had now been delayed for hours. It seemed the Alliance had been victorious for the day. At this point, the gloves were off, and personal messages were leaked on both sides, putting the server on a path of mutually assured destruction. Every week, both sides participated in constant battles with no clear winner on either side, slowly grinding the server down from a high to medium population. A server built on mutual respect, trust, and peace, has been thrust into chaos by the actions of a single man and his love for one e-girl. And while I'd like to say this story has a happy ending, the War of Razorgore continues.